I'm Sarah Ferris, true crime podcast producer.
And I'm Katherine Schweit, former head of the FBI's active shooter program.
And you're listening to Stop the Killing.
Hi, Stop the Killing podcast fans. This is Katherine Schweit, one of the co-hosts of Stop the Killing podcast, and Sarah Ferris, who is the other host, is not on this call. This is a very overdue podcast hit for our special listeners, something that Sarah asked me to do days ago, but I think as I explain it, you'll understand why I didn't get to it days ago. So I wanted to talk to you about the Charlie Kirk killing here in the United States. And I mostly wanted to, of course, have real facts to go on as we started, because it is probably one of the most political hot potato cases that I've ever worked on. I'm not working on it, of course, but I've ever talked about. And more so, and I'll get into it a little bit more, but the sensitivity that people have to this case and the words that you use is astonishing. So I'm going to read some of the stuff that has been coming together about it, and then I'm sure there'll be more to come. But I want to give you some of the basics so we have a baseline, especially if you know pieces of it, but it all came together and you don't know exactly what's happened. So I'm going to tell you this story about what happened 5 days ago. And it happened 5 days ago, and I've been doing news interviews for 5 days, which is why I'm doing this with a ball cap on in my office at home, because I'm too tired to get dressed up nicely. But that said, forgive my appearance and let me tell you what the facts are of this shooting. And it's an assassination, which certainly falls into the category of an active shooter situation, potentially. But somebody might say, but not really, because an assassination is a person who seeks to kill one person. But why somebody does it falls into the same category of why other people commit mass murders or commit active shooter incidents or mass killings. So there's a lot of commonalities on the things that we talk about on this podcast that I just wanted to share with you as we bring this together, because I'm sure that if you follow our podcast, you are familiar with some of the things that we'll talk about, and you're also probably curious about what's going on in this case. So let me start from the beginning and tell you that Charlie Kirk is considered to be a political commentator and activist. He is a very strong supporter of Donald Trump and worked very hard to get him elected. He's a very young person who right out of college started an organization that subsequent to that worked very hard to advance their positions on many things and worked very hard to get the current president elected. I've talked to people, of course, who are all older, and I don't mean older like 70, I mean older like 40, and have never heard of Charlie Kirk. So if you haven't, he's everywhere, and ask anybody who's younger, they know who Charlie Kirk is. So with that said, one of the things that Charlie Kirk was doing in the United States at this time was he was on a tour to U.S. campuses as part of an organization that he founded called Turning Point USA. And Turning Point USA is this youth activist group, and he called this event the American Comeback Tour. And he was going to go to all these different campuses. He would go to these campuses and he would put up a tent that said American Comeback on the top of it. And then in huge letters on the sides of it, it would say, "Prove me wrong." And his shtick, his style of speaking, certainly he did plenty of speeches. But in this comeback tour, the concept was that he would come onto a college campus and sit down in a chair, and people could come up in line and ask him questions, and they could have a conversation back and forth about those. And his point is, think about the name of it, prove me wrong. Like, he believed he had a position on things that he believed, and he believed that he had the facts that supported his positions, And he invited people who would come up and talk to him to prove him wrong about those particular positions. Now, what those positions are, I'll do a little bit of a separate piece on that. Maybe I'll add it to this, but I don't want to get into that right at the very beginning. I just want to tell you what happened here is that he's a 31-year-old political commentator and activist named Charlie Kirk. He was speaking at this event 20 minutes into this event on September 10th. So at about 12:20 p.m., which would be mountain time because it was out in the state of Utah. He was at the Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, O-R-E-M, Orem, Utah. And 20 minutes into the speaking engagement, he was actually, ironically, sadly, answering a question that had been asked about mass shooters. And he got about half of the sentence out, and a sniper fired a round directly into his neck, severing everything and killing him probably instantly. The sniper was, as it turns out, likely on top of a building, somewhat less than 200 yards away from where he was sitting on a stool talking to people. There were hundreds of people on the grass in front of him who all immediately ducked down and then realized that there was just this one shot that had occurred, and they took off and started running. So the shooter didn't shoot at anybody else except for Mr. Kirk, and law enforcement was able to gather these facts after the fact. Mr. Kirk was put in a personal vehicle and driven to the hospital and pronounced dead. Law enforcement authorities found a basket full of plethora is what I was going to say, a basket full of evidence right away as they went to look to see whether or not they could find the shooter. But what they didn't have was the shooter himself or herself. They were able to find from the images that they found on campus security cameras, within a very short time, in the same day, they found video image of a person who appeared to be running from a rooftop of a building that was, like I mentioned before, somewhat short of 200 yards away from the spot where Mr. Kirk was sitting. And this person, other cameras angles allowed them to see this person run across the top of a roof, and then a building called the Lucy Center, or L-O-S-E-E. I'm guessing it's pronounced that way, but I'm sorry to people from Utah if I'm not pronouncing it wrong. Lucy Center. And this person ran across the building top to the back of the building, or to the other side of the building. And he was carrying something with him, and then he hurtled himself over the edge of the building, and then while he was holding on, dropped down, ran off into the woods, and disappeared. So law enforcement did not have eyes on that person, and he took off. What they were able to get is a good picture of the subject walking upstairs in the building where he was walking. Grainier video of a person scrambling off the rooftop minutes later after the assassination. And on top of the building, they found what they considered to be shoe and palm prints of the person who did this work. Possibly you might have heard people say arm prints or forearm prints. We don't take forearm prints, but it's an impression. It gives you the size of a person if they're laying down on, say, for instance, on a gravel rooftop. So the person laying down on a gravel rooftop using a sniper rifle would have had to have been, which I posited with news interviews right from the first day, it would have been a sniper rifle. It would have been what we call benched. A benched sniper rifle is a benched rifle means that it was put, like, for instance, it could be put on a stand so that it holds perfectly still, or a sniper rifle that has its own, prongs that come out and stand up as if like you see prongs on a pair of sunglasses, right? And they help steady the gun on the ground so that it's in a steady position, and then you can position it. Shooting from that distance isn't impossible by any means. For a sniper, that's what the weapon is designed to do, and that's what the person is designed to do, but it does take some training. You don't just walk up on that roof one day, having purchased that gun, yesterday, and fire it at that distance. A lot of times snipers, as are trained in military, are trained to gauge, or SWAT teams, they're trained to gauge, the wind that might be blowing, or, if there's rain or anything else that might potentially interfere, like if you're shooting nearer by trees and you want to make sure that you shoot, through trees and that the leaves are not going to interfere. So you want to have a clean shot. That's what they call it, a clean shot. It's even so precise that you take a breath and hold your breath while you pull the trigger. That's how exacting it is. So this person clearly planned this, had the right tools to do the assassination, and then left. Now, fast forward to that day, what happened is the initial press conferences that were done, and of course the governor of Utah and the Bureau of Investigations for the state in Utah would have been the primary investigators in this. The FBI would have come in to provide support in assets and resources, meaning they will come in and do interviews of people or collect the evidence and, check bullet trajectory potentials and things like that. We'd bring our evidence teams in to help gather accurate information that could be used at a trial. But the intention, I think, all along is that somebody who's shot in this kind of environment is shot, and it's generally going to be murder charges that are filed at the state level. It might be murder charges, some level of murder charges, or attempted murder, and charges for gun violations, for instance, and some other things. And in this case, at least to date, murder, a gun violation, and obstruction of justice charges have been talked about by the governor to be charged at the state level. So many people have asked me in interviews, are they going to charge federally, and what could they charge federally? So let me just address that right now. There certainly is a possibility that there could be federal charges, but in general, I say as a prosecutor, what you seek to charge is, first of all, what you can prove, and you also charge based on what the evidence tells us. So in this case, I heard someone say, for instance, can they charge domestic terrorism charges? Well, there's no federal domestic terrorism charge. The state of Utah doesn't have a state domestic terrorism charge. So that's not very likely to occur. If you could tie the individual to specifically to some foreign terrorist organization, you could charge that. So it really takes what does the evidence really tell us? And then could you charge federal gun charges versus state gun charges? Yes, you certainly can potentially, but if there's a murder charge going on in the state trial, you're going to acquiesce, and when it comes to prosecution, you're not going to prioritize a federal gun charge over a state murder charge. So the obstruction charge, which I've heard mentioned, just for sake of clarification, would be, potential charge because he hid evidence or tried to destroy evidence, and because he took off himself. So in the taking off part, I guess, is where I left the story off. So let me finish this part of the story. There's video of the person of interest on a rooftop and photos of an individual. And the governor of Utah and others hold a press conference saying, and I'm telling you all this in retrospect because everything that was going on that you might have seen in your social media feed was a lot of speculative stuff that wasn't necessarily accurate. So we want you to have the accurate picture now that everybody's been able to gather the accurate details about what occurred and when it occurred. So the governor of Utah held a press conference and said, hey, we have good evidence, video evidence. And the SAC for the Utah FBI office was out there, and of course the head of the state police out there, bureau out there. And they said, we have good evidence, and we will hope to be able to use our technical resources to identify this individual. And if we can't, we'll release the pictures. And so to me, that said to me right away, they have good pictures of an individual, and they're hoping that facial recognition will help them identify the person. But within a handful of hours, within probably 4 or 5 hours, they had not been able to identify through technical resources, and they released the photographs. They released the photographs at 3 in the afternoon, I would say Eastern time maybe. And within a short period of time, things occurred that we didn't necessarily hear about right away. But what was happening behind the scenes is that the person who is now being charged, that shooter, is a 22-year-old Utah resident of the state of Utah. And that 22-year-old went back to his home. Now, when I say went back to his home, one of the things in the surveillance video that they were able to check, they were able to tell that this individual came to the campus at 8 o'clock in the morning that day, and they have surveillance video of his vehicle coming, but they didn't have the ID on the vehicle, right? So you get a likelihood of what kind of vehicle it is. Oh, it's a Chevy Malibu that's black, but it doesn't mean that you know exactly whose it is. So they have a lot of evidence that visually could match. The kid had a T-shirt on. The kid had a weapon with him. The kid came in a car. He looks like this. He's a white kid. He looks this tall. His hair is this length. Those are the kind of things that I mean. You don't have a positive identification, but it helps you get to an identification because you have a lot more to work with. So while everybody is looking for this person, and as the media would say, well, the manhunt is underway, this 22-year-old drives home. And in the meantime, he's having like text communications with his buddies, a big group of friends, and he's making comments. But he goes home and the pictures have been released, and we don't have the exact dialogue, right? But if we were in the movies, we'd write the dialogue. His dad, he comes in the door. His dad confronts him and says, hey, this is you. And he says, and supposedly wearing the same clothes that are seen in the surveillance video, and that were like captured in the parking lot the same day. And his dad says, hey, this is you, and we want, you need to turn yourself in. And you need to turn yourself in. And the kid supposedly says no. And again, this is law enforcement reporting. It's not me saying, I guess this is what happened. Law enforcement is now reporting that the dad confronted him and said, you have to turn yourself in. The kid said no, but they also brought over a youth pastor who happens to be reportedly a U.S. Marshal and task force officer. And that youth pastor also talked to him. And after that, he kind of relented and decided that, yes, he should turn himself in. So they call the local county sheriff, and the sheriff's office personnel come over and he turns himself in. So it's a voluntary turn in, which is not super unusual when somebody realizes they're going to be caught and they don't want to be killed. And so voluntary turn in. So to date, right now, law enforcement is reporting that the subject is not cooperating. He's not making any statements. He's not helping them out at all. However, they point out everybody else is. The dad has talked to them, the people, conversations that he had with the pastor, the marshal service, none of those are protected in terms of privacy. All of those, they repeat what's happening, and all of those can be used against him. In addition to that, there's a Discord channel that he's on where he was chatting back and forth about having to retrieve a rifle that was wrapped in a towel that he dropped in a bush. And he talks about some of the things that he said he had to change his clothes, and that there were some of the things that he'd put in engravings on the rifle. So there were definitely things that were put in engravings on the rifle or on the bullet casings of the magazines. They are basically 4 different things that all clearly indicate that he spends time online and he spends time in gaming sites. And how to interpret what those are, I think I'm just going to say it's kind of still underway. Because I can tell you what they are, but it doesn't know. I mean, if you play gaming things, like one of them is he made a reference on one of the rounds of, meaning one of the bullets, he wrote, oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao Ciao. That's words to a song. Those are words likely, they're a song that it's actually an Italian anti-fascist song associated with World War II, but it's kind of been co-opted by anti-fascist groups. So, what does that mean and why did he do that? One of the things that he wrote on a round is, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO, laughing my ass off, right? So a very juvenile kind of thing to write on it, but he still wrote it anyway. there was a third one, an unfired round, that had the words, "Hey, fascist, catch," etched on the casing. And it had the symbols pointing up, then to the right, then 3 arrows pointing down. And that could have been also like a reference to an anti-fascist network. And then there was another one, and I'm not going to even try to go into the details of it because it's even more very online gamer and message board user kind of comments. But what these mean, what the significance are to those, doesn't tell us for sure about his motivation, right? We do know that a lot of people who we see committing violence domestically are doing it solely for the fact that they can do it, right? What is the reason behind it? There can be lots of reasons. I put the reasons into like 3 categories. You're either advancing your political position, you're advancing some ideological position, or you got a big ego, you want to draw your attention, you want to draw yourself into the play, and you want to draw attention to yourself. So political, ideological, or ego. These are the 3 basic buckets that I think you put people into when they commit violent acts, particularly against prominent political figures or religious figures or people who have particular positions themselves. Now, what we know for sure is that we don't necessarily have the motive yet. Law enforcement is busy. What are they doing right now? They have to go through all the evidence that they're collecting on his social media feeds, historical social media postings and feeds, friends. They're looking at who are his friends, what are his friends saying about them, interviewing as many people that they can, looking at the search histories on his phone, on his computers, looking at his car, what's in it, what isn't in it, what is his life like, talking to people who he was around. Some of the reporting has already said that his family said he seemed to be getting more radical, more politically concerned. What does that mean? We don't really know for sure yet, but will come. There was a franticness. I got to ask this in an interview recently, which I think is valuable to appreciate. There's a franticness to trying to capture somebody who is out on the lam and has tried to kill somebody, or has, in this case, killed somebody. And that franticness prompts us to act very quickly and to move at a very quick pace and to be very nervous. But one of the things that we know in law enforcement, and as a former prosecutor, I would say, is that once we have somebody in custody, everybody needs to take lots of deep air breaths, calm down, and do their job. So where is the investigation right now? This is where the investigation is. Now, I'm not talking about any of the political fallout from this. That's like a separate conversation. But from an investigative standpoint, this is where we are now. Law enforcement and prosecutors are going to arraign this guy. By the time you listen to this, he's probably already been arraigned, meaning that he's had his chance to come to court and presumably plead not guilty. And then they'll tell him what he's been charged with. And that doesn't mean that's the only thing he can be charged with. They can change those charges. They can add to them superseding indictments, we would call it, superseding charges. There can be federal charges filed against him if different evidence shows that there's other things that he can be charged with. But he'll come before the court, which is the law, that when you are in custody, charged with a crime, you have to come before the court. And the prosecutors have to explain why they're holding you, why they want the court to hold you. And you can ask for, bail. In this case, you don't give somebody who's out in for murder bail, but generally this is what happens at this kind of a hearing, right? Oh, I want to get out on my own recognizance. I want to get out on bail. Nobody's getting out on bail on a murder charge, but you still get a chance formally to hear what the charges are against you. It gives your defense attorney a chance to set speculations, what they expect. The prosecutors don't have to lay out their whole case. They just have to say, this is what we're charging somebody with. And in the case of, say, it wasn't a capital murder case like this might be, which is potentially even death penalty case. If it was a lighter charge, like drunk driving or something, not that that's a light charge, but it was a public intoxication and you arrested somebody, and you might feel that they're not going to show up for their hearing. The defense counsel could say, hey, yeah, he will show up. Do you want me to turn over his passport? Say if you're on the edge of the country and like in Southern California or something. So there are conditions. You can get conditions for release. Nobody's going to get released when there's murder charges. And so really the arraignment is an opportunity to hear what charges are filed against you, to plead not guilty. And then it begins the slow and tedious process of looking at all the evidence that's been gathered, continue to gather evidence, continue to gather interviews, build a timeline on who this subject was long before he became a killer. And so the law enforcement will back all the way up to his childhood. So what kind of child was he? Did he have troubles with this or that? What was reported in the schools? What did his friends say? What did the neighbors say? Why did he go to school? Why did he get a full ride scholarship and then quit that scholarship after one semester at the school? He had very good grades, very smart kid, gets a full ride scholarship, then leaves the school. Then he's going to school for a different type of skill. How was he doing in that? There's a reason why. And then that's a parallel to what was he doing online? What was he doing on paper? It used to be that would be like what they're writing in their notebooks, right? And telling their friends and talking on the phone. Now it's what do we see on his phone? What do we see in his search history? What do we see in his Discord conversations, in his online gaming activity? What do we see him looking to? Because as we see, and recently, the Anti-Defamation League did a great piece recently tracking 2 school shooters who started as a curiosity on a website that was kind of a gore website, and then they grew to admire the people that they were talking about on this website, including school shooters, and then they became school shooters themselves in a matter of 18 months. So did this person start out as a curiosity looking at certain sites, and it became something? Was this person's actions politically motivated? Was it ideologically motivated? Or was it motivated by a sense of wanting to feel important and wanting people to talk about him? So that's kind of where we are in this case. There is a lot more to come, and there's a lot more that I haven't really touched on in great detail. I'm just going to give you some examples of that. The day that this occurred, people started talking about, in public, politicians, Republicans and Democrats, whoever they were, and also influential people when it comes to influential people in the world of commentators, started to talk about who this person was. We didn't know who the person was, and the person hadn't been in custody. But, and this would be why I think I need to do something about media literacy and media coverage. Immediately, there were calls for vengeance, basically, I think is the best word for it. And those have continued today. 5 days later, there are still public officials calling for vengeance because of this individual's death. And in the process of these 5 days, there has been a tremendous amount of conspiracy theories and speculation about who this person is, why this person was motivated to do this assassination, and who is behind it. Was it this organization or this government? And the conspiracy theories and the speculation about this individual, based on the small amount of information we have, has not stopped everybody on the left, on the right, in between, high political office, regular people on the street, your neighbor, your friend, your sister, your brother, everybody from speculating and giving an opinion about what this person did or didn't do and why they did it and what should happen to this person. Not just this person should get the death penalty, as many are saying, because it is something that's can be charged and you can be convicted, and it's a capital case in Utah potentially. But what's the political story behind it? That many people on all sides of the political spectrum have spent the bulk of their time in the last 5 days, kind of hating on the other side, whoever the other side is, whatever the other side is of their particular position, and talking and blaming the other side for the assassination of this guy, Charlie Kirk, who, as I said, was 31. And it should, that idea of political vengeance and political agendas and conspiracy theories is like a whole other discussion that I'd love to have, but not this very moment, because I want to end this pointing out that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. No one should be assassinated for speaking, and that includes people speaking against Charlie Kirk. No one has the right to take another person's life because that person was speaking firmly about what they believe in, even if you don't like what they were saying. And Charlie Kirk was married, and he leaves behind a wife and 2 kids because he was saying what he believed in, which is, in my mind, no different than Martin Luther King, who was assassinated and left behind a wife and family because he was saying what he believed in. And we have to rise above that in this country in order for this country to survive. We learned from the 60s and the 70s that violence that begets violence does not create a good outcome. So this is my preachy part to just say, I don't care if you like Charlie Kirk or you don't like Charlie Kirk in his position. No one should be allowed to kill somebody else for their political position or their social position or their free speech. That's what our Constitution gives us the right to do. That's what our First Amendment is all about. So, as I said to somebody the other day who asked me this on a news channel, what can you do to impact things if you're having this conversation with yourself, your friends, and others? Go to your social media feeds and see what memes you've posted and see what groups and people that you've targeted and identified them as groups of people who are this or that, and take those things down. Clean your own social media feed and try not to pass along vitriol and hate, because we are not going to get past the hate part of it if we make a decision that it's more important for us to hate a group of other people than it is for us to come together as a population. And I think we kind of are at that crisis point in the United States. I had a commentator ask me, is it too late? And I said, no, it's not too late. I said, all we need to do is be more kind to each other. And those of you who listen to my podcast know that I always talk about kindness. I think kindness is certainly underrated benefit that we can all share more of. It's easy to be kind, I think. Kindness is free, I say. We have to be kind, and we have to be kinder to each other. And that it means all the time. That means all the time, not just sometime. Be kind all the time, even when you want to categorize people into some category. You don't know that person well enough to categorize an entire population of people into some category that you also identify as some group you hate. Hate doesn't win, as everybody says. Kindness does. And if we talk to our children and teach them to be kind and tell them when they have confrontations with people at school on the playground to be kind and not to fight, and we're teaching our children to learn how to be kind to each other, I think that it's not too much to ask us as adults to be kind to each other. So I'll leave you with that thought and hope that you all have a good day. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Stop the Killing. Remember, these conversations aren't just important, they're necessary. If you're ready to dive deeper into the issues we cover, Katherine's book, Stop the Killing, and also How to Talk About Guns with Anyone are available now at katherineschweit.com. Stop the Killing is proudly produced by Sarah Ferris Media. For more award-winning podcasts like Conning the Con and Watching Two Detectives, visit sarahferrismedia.com. As an independent podcast, we rely on your support to keep these critical discussions alive. If you value our work, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/stopthekilling. or by simply subscribing on Apple Podcasts now. Not only will you help us to continue this mission, but you'll also get early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive content that takes a deeper look into unfolding incidents. And don't forget, Stop the Killing is a team effort. You can make a difference by leaving a review on Apple and sharing this podcast with others. Together, we can keep pushing these conversations forward. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay safe, stay informed, and let's continue to stop the killing.